Call the meeting to order. Would you please take the roll call?
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Foley? Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Gates?
Here.
Commissioner Mom? Here. Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
And Chair Rock?
Here. Thank you. We don't have any citizens for comments, do we?
Yes.
And Commissioner
Oh.
Foley just arrived.
Okay.
Got to say here.
Here.
No
No citizen comments. Okay, so adoption of the agenda.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just mention that for the first item, one of the property owners is not here yet. They're on their way. So I don't know if you would like to switch them around, these two items around, so we could do the second one, item 4B first.
Okay, that sounds fine with me. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right. I'll wait for these people, see if they do have any comments. No citizen comments? Okay. So let's move to 4B.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commission. Some time ago, the Commission asked staff to look into a possible SDC loan program or some way to supplement SDC funds for development in the Urban Renewal District. Staff's since done that. I've done a brief analysis. I've asked some questions, looked into different loan programs, and you have my report before you tonight. I'll just kind of give you the long and short of it real quick, and then we can open it up for discussion. But from what I've seen, loan programs can cost some money, and they require a lot of administration, a lot of overseeing and underwriting. So really, given the economy of scale, you'd have to have a really large sum of money in order to generate enough program-specific revenue off of interest to recoup your money with any reasonable amount of time. So when we're looking at almost $200,000 in our budget to put up for a loan, a lot of that's going to be spent for underwriting, legal fees, administration costs, that sort of thing. So in talking with the finance director, really at this level it doesn't pencil that well. Whereas I think maybe a loan program, a direct loan program that targets new development to help offset the cost, maybe not directly associated with SDCs. Because a lot of times in these small infill lots, targeting to SDCs really isn't that much of an attractor because you're not paying. I mean, it could be costly, but it's not on a huge level where it's going to be a deterrent for some developers. Whereas other issues such as maybe relocation of a sewer line or half-street improvements or other mitigation type things that need to happen to make these infill lots developed, maybe we have a grant program that is kind of open-ended, targeting those things. So if a developer experiences a hardship, such as, say for instance, the 12th and Main property has a 100-year-old sewer line going right through the middle of it. That's very costly to remove that and replace that line and put it out in the street. So if maybe this developer is doing a mixed-use type of development or a development that aligns with our goals for downtown, then it qualifies for this grant where we can just supplement that amount of money to offset some of his costs to get that property developed. That's kind of what I was thinking. Given our resources here within the city, a loan program, we would have to contract out to a third party to oversee the loan, to do all of the underwriting and the administration that goes with it. Whereas we can do that, but again, with this amount of money that we have, this small amount, $200,000, I guess we need to talk about whether it's worth doing that or not. I don't have hard figures for you right now as to what it would cost. I did attach a question and answer sheet that goes over some of these issues. So I did ask about the typical administration costs. We'd have to have additional staff time. we would look at a few $1,000s. Maybe we could contract with someone to oversee this this loan program for about $20,000, which would be maybe an average cost.
Eric, I had a question about, did you do these calculations using different interest rates? So say the interest rates go back up to 18%, would it be profitable at that point?
Right, so the interest rate...
No.
Well, right now, we do finance SDCs. We will. It's kind of a last resort with our bankrupting, and that's at 9%. But 18%, I haven't run the different
Okay.
percentage numbers.
Okay.
I can certainly do that.
Here
Even
are
with-
the questions and answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not working.
It's not working.
No, I told
Yeah, we got-
Josie.
Oh,
that-
Paul has some.
Do you want me to just run through them?
Yes.
I've read
Okay.
them.
Okay.
Do you just,
Okay, so I guess my question is, this was what you looked at for SBCs.
Right.
And so kind of the recommendation that you're coming back with is that the SDC loan program would not work to help development, but maybe another avenue.
Yeah. I think an SDC loan program would work on a larger scale.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at industrial development where SDCs could be a deterrent for developing
Right.
a piece of property,
Right.
then that's when I think it makes sense when you go in and look at these the administrative costs, the underwriting fees and so forth, and contracting out with a third party. That's where, and that's, you generate enough interest off those loans to recoup your money
Right.
within a reasonable amount of time. Well, with what we're doing and what we'd be paying out, with the amount of money that we would have to loan and what we would be paying out of that money, it would take us a long time to recoup that money.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't see it within 10 years, I would imagine. So whereas a direct grant program that doesn't necessarily target SDCs, because in this case, on the smaller level, I don't think that SDC is a deterrent for developers to come in and develop. However, I think if you broaden that to just structure it in a way where it would offset hardship costs to mitigate. So environmental cleanup, removal of utilities, upgrading utilities, that sort of thing, street improvements. I think that would go it'd go a lot longer, and you get more bang for your buck, and then it would be more of a marketing tool, I think. That way they could customize it to that development. You could tie it to employment. You could tie it to a type of development that you want, a mixed use. So it's just my thought on that.
okay, Commissioner Polly?
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm understanding the benefits of this. The grant structure would be less costly to administer. We could do it in-house, so to speak. It'd be less timely, and also it would require matching funds like the other grant programs
Right,
we have to
right.
make sure that they have buy-in, that type
Right,
of thing.
or the developer is investing a certain amount for this project, then you would be eligible for this grant. So, and it'd be easy to kind of roll in because we already kind of have a process established for these, the adaptive reuse and storefront grant. I could see us using a lot of the criteria from the adaptive reuse for a new construction mitigation grant or whatever we want to call it. But also attaching it to job creation and more specific on the type of development we want to see on those properties.
So we already have the system set up, we just have to adjust it a little bit.
Yeah,
to fit
it'd be a
this
little more
need.
time, more evaluation, but it's something that's doable as opposed to a loan right now. Because, you know, we would have to go out and we'd have to do RFPs for a bank to see if we can even get a bank or a lender interested
Right.
in this amount of money for a loan. And, you know, some banks might not even think it's worth it, so we might have a hard time there.
That would take a lot of time and
It would take a lot of
resources to even do
time.
that
We'd have to have the
process.
interviews and make sure their credentials, and each loan that comes through, we would have to evaluate the financials and, you know, their financial strength, I guess, to pay it back and that sort of thing, and then underwrite it, and it's a lot of red tape.
Thank you. Commissioner Edgar?
I was reading about how Wilsonville has put together a new prospective urban renewal district that's going to have a lot of development opportunity in it. And what they're doing is they're coming back, and it's like when they achieve a threshold, from what I could read, then we backfill directly TIF type tax assessments back to them as an incentive. So it's rather than it, in a sense, coming to the urban renewal district, they get it.
To be a direct reimbursement.
Or direct reimbursement. And they're using that, it appears from what I read, that they're using that as the way that they're incentivizing this window. And again, it's almost like the window that I perceive that we have for apartments, where they get tax the credits or deferments
Right.
on vertical housing. But so it's that's 10 years. This could be some type of period, but it's a way to entice development. And as yet, they have not had it click in, but that's what they've decided to attempt to do in Wilsonville. And so, again, we have to be competitive.
Well,
And that's what my perception is. What can we do that gives us enough ability to say, hey, we've got something going here in Oregon City, and we'd like for you to invest into Oregon City.
that could work. However, we do have an obstacle here in Oregon City. Each project that would come in like that, we would have to go to a vote if it's over $1 million.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be put on the ballot. Because that's considered right now, the way our attorneys are interpreting it, that's the bond, and that's a commitment of public funds. So that's the way we would have to approach it at this point.
It is something we could look at.
We could look at that, certainly, yeah.
Commissioner Mum?
That was a good point, Paul, about Wilsonville. I know that, I think the mayor went to a discussion and had that with Wilsonville. I think that's still early on, and maybe he could speak to that. I do like the loan piece of this, so if there's anything else that we could do, but I think, looking into that a little bit more, like you had suggested.
The
would be
loan,
good.
the loan or the grant?
The loan piece where you would use the criteria and help mitigate.
Okay. I was talking about that in reference to a grant program, a direct grant.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
So it'd be set up just like our storefront or adaptive reuse, and we would just use that money. We'd have, say, a maximum of 200,000 for maybe one project per year.
Oh, I think that would be great too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Commissioner Neely? Mayor Neely?
Yeah, I did have a chance to talk to the mayor of Wilsonville about that particular project. They also, a certain percentage of that increment goes back to the taxing districts, and during that period of time, I think it was something like 25%. It is an experiment on their part, but they have some industrial lands and I think buildings that they want to get back into production and so forth. And they were trying to meet a lot of the criticisms we oftentimes hear about SDCs, and try to meet some of those criticisms that you really have something guaranteed that you're putting the money back into, as opposed to that level of uncertainty. The example you mentioned in terms of you're mentioning the 100-year-old sewer pipe under the 12th and Main. I guess I've often wondered why that property doesn't move, and I know you've had interest in it, but why wouldn't the Urban Renewal District itself go ahead and take care of some of those issues, and perhaps make the property more value and of more interest to a developer ahead of time?
That's certainly an option. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. That's one way we could use the money.
Make it shovel ready, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right.
So the Urban Renewal Commission would
Go
pay to
ahead.
have the pipe fixed?
That's what I'm suggesting. Yeah, and as she says, the terms we use are shovel ready, and
That's certainly an option. That would also employ our Public Works Department, or maybe hiring a third-party contractor to go
Yeah.
and do that. But that's certainly an option. Yeah.
So I guess more for you to look and reach.
It'd be
Absolutely.
interesting to see an estimate on that,
Mm-hmm. Would.
Yeah.
to see how much that would cost.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're going for with our industrial lands, is just to get
The
it
other
site
thing I
ready.
want to mention, and actually Commissioner Yates has mentioned this on several occasions, his interpretation of the voter-approved use of funds need not be specific, be I believe this is the way he interprets it anyway, need not be project-specific. It could be devoted to a given area, and you have a maximum degree of indebtedness. And if you could define what those benefits would be, you might not have to deal with it on a single project by a single project basis. I don't know if you're hearing me, Phil, but I think that was your interpretation, was it not?
It is, yes.
And so we probably have to take a little longer term look at our approved indebtedness, because if we can demonstrate we're going to be able to attract some industries in here based on that, and we can convince the voters, we may not have a project by project specific restriction on us.
Right. We could have an amount that we were wanting to invest and put that before the voters and have that approved.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
be all said and done by the time a developer comes in. To
Right.
develop. Yeah.
Phil, did you have any questions?
I do have a question. Eric, do you know how much SDCs were paid into the city last year, or 2012, 2013, any time period?
I don't have that figure, Phil. I'll have to go back and research that.
Because it seems to me, my thought behind this SDC review that you're doing now, when I suggested it, I think I was one of the people that suggested it at least, was if you've got a $200,000 budget, and I don't know what the SDCs are annually, but let's just say it's $400,000 a year, that's what you could expect to see, then you could design a program, a grant program, that, I mean, maybe you'd want to pick winners and losers, and maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you just want to encourage incrementally development through relief of part of the STC obligation on an across-the-board basis. And it would depend really on how much development was going on and whether or not you wanted to target your grants to specific kinds of development as opposed to kind of any kind of development. But my thought had been that this might be an easy, administratively easy way to encourage development in a district by reducing STCs.
Reducing SDCs, is that what you were saying, Phil?
I'm wondering, what is the ratio between the available funds that we have to the district and what are the current SDC obligations that are being generated in the district? And it seems to me that ratio, if we have $200,000 of available funds, what are the SDCs in the district for a year? I mean, unless you know that ratio, I'm not sure it makes any sense to make any decisions about a program. If the ratios are way out of whack so that it wouldn't have any impact, then it's a non-starter.
Well, as I said, I don't have those figures in front of me. That's something I can go back and research. I'm not quite sure I understand the concept. It might involve a little further discussion between you and myself, Phil, but
We do have SDC credits on development, do we not?
There is a way to apply for SDC credits depending on what the use was before it, how long that use has been discontinued, and what the proposed use is.
certain discounts that we give as well.
It's complicated in the downtown because of the age of the downtown, who's actually paid SDCs, who never did, depending on when the building was constructed or when it was moved
Right.
in, how long your use has been there.
But if we're looking at a very large project like the Rossman landfill, and there is a potential for significant SDCs that if they were encumbered might represent more than what is necessary globally for the property, may or may not, but whatever it is, but let's say that it, as an incentive, we say that this X block of dollars that would have otherwise come in SDCs, we percentage reduce that as an incentive to the developer, because we're going to get a lot of money for a major development, and we just, in a sense, slice a little of it off and not incur debt. We just slice a little bit of it off for the purpose of incentivizing that development on that site.
I think it's just important to remember that the SDCs are an estimate of the total trips generated. You remember? Okay, so we went through the transportation system plan, let's say. We said, okay, we've identified these intersections that are needed to be improved. Here's the roads that need to be improved to accommodate growth. It's going to cost $75 million. Okay? And we're projecting X trips. Right? And so it's tied to trips and then the trip generation. So when you say, I'm just going to reduce your SDCs by 10% or 50, whatever we choose, that means that you are going to come up that much short of being able to meet your projects.
But in this case, like at the Rossman landfill, in specific, we got grant monies and other monies that came in that fulfilled a great deal of the need for mitigation with the jug handle project, and therefore not necessarily, we were lucky. We got the money, it's done. So now those people coming in don't have to pay for that. It's there. It's in the ground.
But I think it's remember though that SDCs are system wide. They're
Yes,
not targeted
that.
to a specific location.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to think that.
But we don't necessarily always encumber all of this or maybe we should be looking at encumbering it to a geographical area because if they're the ones that are paying for it, what are they getting out of it? And if or are we going to take that money and just put it any place we want?
But I think you got to remember though, this is providing adequacy of a facility for the larger population. Now, if someone's putting in a large development and they need to put a new light in on Abernethy Drive, on Abernethy Road, they're responsible to do that. They need to do that. But these trips that they're creating from that are going to impact Warner Milne Lynn Avenue. So that's where the SDCs are thought of more globally. I think you'd have a hard time targeting and saying Park Place has this SDC, South End has this SDC, downtown has this SDC. That's just not the way it's set up because you're looking at the global system. It's very. I'm not aware of a system where a jurisdiction targets SDCs specific to an area and says I have 3, 4, 5 different SDCs based on where you're located in the city. But we've, like for example, on Malala Avenue, we offer reduction. The 10% reduction because we consider that a transit-oriented development. They have bus trips, so that you can make the argument that if we develop that out the way we wanted to with mixed use, commercial, residential, office, employment opportunities, you could see a reduction in the number of trips generated with a building relative to what you would see if we put it up in Park Place where we have no transit. So I think you need to think of it in that concept, so we already do offer a reduction in downtown for everybody.
But yet at the same time, I remember talking to the rental agent from the Oregon City Shopping Center, and they held off building a new building on the Oregon City Shopping Center until we got going on our McLaughlin and Phase 2 enhancement project.
That's correct.
Because otherwise they would be held responsible. Their perception was to complete part of or pay for part of that project.
That's correct.
So they were waiting us out for us to get our job done. But yet at the same time, isn't that kind of a case that sometimes we look at specific improvements? Now in this case, like the Rossman landfill, we've got that specific improvement in the ground. And this might be the classic case where we are probably in a better position to use maybe an inducement to a developer of saying, okay, we can mitigate part of the SDCs because we now have in the ground those improvements that previous to this, we might have been looking to that earlier developer to have done, like in the case of the rivers.
But I think two things there. One is with the new transportation system plan, the $22 million jug handle project is not in the system development, is not in the project list. So we can't give them, so the jug handle project's done. I agree, the capacity's there, but we're also not charging SDCs for it right now because that project's completed. So there would be no credit to give them.
Granted, but again, that's the reason why we could potentially, with that development, look at a possible reduction, because we're not asking for them to do something that other developers or other locations that might be a requirement. It just seems like it fits in that size.
I guess the other part of this too is that if you come in and you have a project that you're required to put in along your frontage, you can, through the system development charge ordinance, you can request reductions in credits. And I think that's the way you want to handle it, rather than just saying we're going to give so-and-so a benefit based on oversizing or looking at how we're asking you to build another lane and put in a light, but yet it's only benefiting you, let's say, 30%. So we do have that process set up where you can apply for credits, because we're going to say it's your frontage, you need to build that whole thing, but we will, if you can demonstrate that a portion of this, a percentage of this, isn't a complete benefit to you, then we have that negotiation about an SDC credit against those. So that is set up in your code right now. So which I think is what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Eric, did you have a comment?
I would just like to make one point if I could. I think we're getting hung up on the term SDC.
Yeah.
And I think the task that I had before me was looking into a loan program. So I think, under my analysis was the fact that, maybe a loan program is not doable right now. It doesn't fit what we're trying to do downtown at this point. But, if a grant is offered, who's to say we're going to, what's that developer going to spend it on? I mean, if he's awarded a grant, given certain criteria that we set forth, the developer gets the money. He could use it on SDC expenses to offset some of his costs. However, he feels that he needs to offset, or he or she needs to offset their costs for development. So it kind of leaves it open without tagging SDC onto it. So basically, I think the bottom line and our intent here is to offset costs for developers to make it more attractive to develop downtown.
Okay.
And I just think that the grant is the easiest way to go about doing that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Polly?
Yes, Commissioner Edgar has always been really great about bringing up concerns about trip capacity and our infrastructure. And so I would hate to see something that's earmarked specifically for that be cut. So I think the grant program is a good way to give those incentives without cutting funds that are specifically earmarked to deal with our capacity and infrastructure, which we do have concerns with.
Okay. Commissioner Neely?
Yeah, I was going to offer the opinion that one of the reasons that the jug handle did get built was because there was public investment to make that a buildable project. That the cost would have gone on to the developer to develop that site, to make that site available to the customers that are coming into it, and it would not have had to do with the SDCs. I mean, your example of the Oregon City Shopping Center is a good example. The public is making an investment on an area that they would probably have to make the investment on, and it really didn't have to do with the SDCs.
Okay. So, would you like us to come back with a different recommendation, or to add on to this, or what would you like us to?
Whatever the commission
Whatever we
wants
want
to
to
do.
What do we think? Yeah.
I think we need to come up with, be competitive, come up with some ideas that allow us to be competitive with any other city or a regional area that might be coveting the same possible dollars in investment customers. So
possibly looking at a program like the Wilsonville program?
whatever it takes.
Well,
Let's keep our options open and have some ideas in hand as to that we're kind of mature with. We've discussed.
I tell you what, in my circles, being competitive is having sites that are project ready.
That's right.
That's
That's it.
about as competitive
And that's-
as you can get.
That was, oh, excuse me, I'll just wait. Well, I guess I'm on, maybe. The point I was making, and I think maybe we need to look at each of those properties that we do own, and what makes them non-shovel ready. And you mentioned something there. I don't know. I don't think you may have mentioned before. I wasn't aware that was an issue. To perhaps make those kinds of investments to make it effectively shovel ready, so that developer could be an expense that they wouldn't have to undertake because they have an old system that they weren't responsible for.
Right. Well, a lot of that work has been done on these properties all over town, really, and that's kind of something I'm going to be bringing to the City Commission on Tuesday, the work session. Is a site analysis that we've done as part of our employment lands inventory. So
I know that 12th and Main piece of property there looks a lot different than when I first moved over
Yeah.
to the city.
Yeah.
So a lot has been done.
Yeah.
I'm aware
Yeah.
of that.
You can't park underneath it anymore.
But you don't risk the ceiling falling on
That's
your car.
right.
So I can come back with some of that analysis and just kind of,
Okay.
we can have like a little work session on that and go over some of the deterrence to development on those sites and maybe form some sort of strategy on what the commission would like to do with some of the
Thank you.
funds.
Wyatt?
Yeah, I just want to comment. I think we could, to help the commission to consider this discussion, Eric was asked to look at whether a loan program made sense. And there's some programs on a federal level that are very large, and we're talking millions of dollars. A revolving loan makes sense because you can use the interest and reinvest in the community. The dollars that we're talking about here are not that significant, and we don't have the capacity to hire an underwriter and look at those things and take on the risk for such a small dollar amount. We might find one developer, and then we're assuming the risk that they could or could not pay. So it doesn't pencil at all to do a loan program. What Eric is saying is, and actually we have the budget flexibility now. So you all approved $1 million of project incentive monies that then you would decide how that was to be used. So that can't be used until we talk to you about it. And Eric set that up in the program. So the decision, I guess, in terms of not moving forward with the loan program, I think is a good one that the commission could agree with. Secondly, we've got that incentive money there. So that gives you a wide range of options should a developer come in and want to use it. And when we get into discussions broadly about system development charges, it's kind of a complex issue. For example, with the jug handle project, a lot of that money was grant money. So the city and the commission did a fantastic job of putting in that project to the benefit of the developers using grant funds, and thereby you couldn't get an SDC reimbursement because you used grant money to build it. So you can't double dip. There is possibilities of having two components of an SDC program, a forward-looking and a backward-looking. For example, if you build a large project that exceeds the capacity that you are using today, you can develop an SDC plan that as people come and join into the system later, they'll pay in SDCs on a reimbursement basis. So that is available to you. And John Lewis is currently working on a couple of SDC updates, so we're fairly current on those things. If we get into discussions about lowering SDCs in certain areas, that's probably a city commission decision on whether you'd want to help spur development. I've seen those things done in other areas, and I have not seen a correlation where that's helped with development in the economy. As much as we like to think that it would, it's not the deciding factor. And we've talked about this before. There's a lot of factors like quality of life, parks, educated workforce, all those kinds of things that businesses consider in addition to SDCs. So I just wanted to say from a financial perspective, I think what Eric has done and what you've done is set up a lot of flexibility on your part to be able to determine how you want to use those funds. So I don't know that a decision needs to be made by the commission today. I think you're in good standing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Eric, for that presentation and for the work that you put into it. Okay. Okay, so let's move back to 4A. Can we do that now?
So this is a a request for an extension for a storefront improvement grant that was awarded December of last year, 2012. Since the time the project was awarded, there's been a transfer of ownership, and that property went up for sale, and there are now just recently new owners to that building. They would like to continue that project as it was approved by the commission in December of last year. They've reapplied. There hasn't been any changes other than the new owners and their financials that we requested. And they all check out. We've accepted them on the staff level. We consider the application complete, and nothing's changed. And so this is just merely, our criteria states that they, once approved, that they have a 12-month period to complete the project. The 12-month ends in December of this year, and so they don't have enough time to complete that project within that time. So they're requesting an additional 12 months. And I think we have the property owners here tonight that can answer some questions.
Hey, Commissioner Neely?
Actually, that was from earlier, probably.
Well, I'd like you to speak again.
Oh, well, okay. I'm happy to. I assume from everything you said there, none of that money has been expended.
You're up twice.
It has not.
None of that money was expended by the previous owner.
Right. We carried it over.
So I had to think of something.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We carried that amount over in this biennium.
Okay.
That's what you get as the president.
Commissioner
Smith.
here this evening. Okay. I have a question for you, actually. So one of the exciting things that we have found about this building is it's important location in the downtown, the building's history itself,
Goodness.
and most importantly, the iconic columns on the front of the building. And in more than one occasion, we have talked about our real interest in seeing the columns on the front of that building reinstalled in some way or recreated. So since the building has changed ownership, the past owners I know definitely had interest in moving forward to seeing that happen at some point. And I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that. I think that what we've seen happen to the front of the building is incredible. I definitely support this continuation to see the facade on the other side of the building complete as well. But I also would like to see the ultimate completion at some point with those columns being replaced in the front. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Oh, sure. I'm Jason Surratt. I'm one of 3 owners of the building, and we took over the building, I believe, in August of this last summer. Graham was the agent on that, and that's why he's here today. The reason we initially purchased in Oregon City was because we believe in Main Street, Oregon City, and we believe it's going in the right direction. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there, and I also believe in the preservation of that building as it was. Sadly, as we all know, I think it was J.C. Penney put layer upon layer of concrete. I think it's about this thick. I mean, it's great for a bomb shelter, not so good if you want to have a good view of your one of your cornerstone buildings coming right off that bridge. As I see things change, we have the brewery folks right across the way doing their changes. Mm-hmm. We have this building that looks good on the front, minus the columns, which certainly I would agree need to be put back in. And then we have this side that not only has facade difficulties on 7th, but also it is in a level of disrepair. For that reason, the grant would help us a great deal to reach our goal of making that facade back to its original glory of that building, but also to deal with some issues with leaking windows and things of that nature. Because I feel this is going to be a fairly costly project, my hope is we can preserve the grant and kind of twofold going into your next question, are we going to put the columns back? I definitely want to, and I definitely plan to. The first thing one of my partners said when he walked up to the building and saw the front, he looks up and he goes, there used to be columns here. Where'd they go? Who took the columns? I'm like, well, they've been gone for a while. So the ideal would be two-phase. This first year, let's get that side done.
Yeah.
Second year, let's work on the columns. And then the cost and the ability to do it is a lot easier, more palatable to my partners. I tend to like to get everything done at once, but they're more, let's ease back, let's let things happen naturally. That'd be the goal.
Very good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
because I think it would look great. And our intent is to have retail on that main floor so that it's tying in with how Oregon City wants to see, envision their future there as well.
Great. Commissioner Neely?
Of course, and this is strictly for the frontage there on 7th Street, and I think we understand that. I want to come back to the columns, and that's not part of this grant. But my recollection was that we actually allocated additional money. $2,000 comes to mind for architectural rendering of the columns, even though that wasn't part of the original grant. Do you know if that money was ever utilized?
I don't think it was.
So I think you should feel free to request at one point, whenever you're ready, to have that brought back in if you're really. Well, we want you to be serious about the columns.
Yeah.
And apparently that money is still available for that purpose. So I wanted to let you know that.
Well, thank you, because I did not know about that.
Yeah.
It's
When
kind of out there in a gray area. It's not associated with this grant award.
It was with the previous frontage, but I don't think they ever used that money that was specifically designated for future column architecture rendering or whatever it would be.
There are some pretty interesting ways that I did, I looked at when I was doing my due diligence on the building as to how you can do a column and have it have an original look without the cost of those materials. And it's never the same. We all know that, but it's also more practical, and it'll still have the same look as people drive and walk by. Now, if they get close and start doing one of these, then they're going to know, oh, it's not the original. But I think that would still fulfill the intent, I would assume.
Commissioner Edgar did quite a bit of work on dealing, I don't know if you've talked to him about that, but dealing with a local company that was...
Well, yes,
Yeah.
There's a fiberglass company, Miles Fiberglass. So I talked to Senior Mr. Miles about this, and he said that he would be happy to go down to Astoria where they have the identical building with the identical columns.
Oh, wow.
Take a mold. You could virtually recreate those. And this is kind of all in a family. Oregon City, doing it here locally, and it's doable.
Well, that's
So,
even better.
so you don't have to even guess what it would take. It's just literally go down there and make a mold off of the identical building and identical, everything, columns are there.
That would be even better.
So so it's something that can be done. It's, some of us that really love to restore or come back to authenticity, this would be neat. And that was the reason why just kind of walking, seeing if there's a way we could figure out how to make it easy. And some of us would like this. If we could make it easy, you help us, we help you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I'd be more than happy to make that easy. The person I was speaking with, it sounds like this person would be better. There's a carbon fiber manufacturer that does some resin casts, and they do CAD design. And I had spoken briefly to them, and their thought was it's a little bit larger than they typically do for a project, but they're willing to take it on. But I think this person, especially if it's local, that's even a lot better.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner, Commissioner, you
No,
there again?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Not intentionally. Don't make me think of something else.
Okay. All right.
Do we have to formally extend
I think
this?
we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so do we have
Move
a,
to approve 13-599 storefront grant program extension request for 702 Main Street.
I second that.
okay. Call for the vote?
Commissioner Qualley,
Aye.
Commissioner Mom,
Aye.
Commissioner Ross,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Neely,
Aye.
Commissioner Ecker,
Yeah, aye.
and Commissioner Yates.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
7-0.
Okay, so our next item is approval of the minutes
Mhm.
from October 2nd.
Move to approve.
Second.
The little button thing is not working, is that right?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure.
It's coming
Yeah.
back.
Lots of things aren't
Keep
working.
pressing it, it's coming back.
I love it, Rocky. Thank you.
Vote.
Oh, call for the vote, yes, excuse me, I'll just,
Polly.
Aye.
Commissioner Mom? Aye. Commissioner Rock?
aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Ecker?
Aye.
And Commissioner Yates.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Future agenda items?
I have one.
Commissioner Polly?
Yes, there's been some concerns, and even tonight was mentioned how we're interpreting the measure 407, how it's being interpreted. And I'm concerned with developers not agreeing maybe with our interpretation. And I'm wondering maybe if we want to talk about having a court ruling or something to the interpretation of it so we can have some certainty going into things and not worry about repercussions that may occur.
I don't know if we want to go to a court ruling.
So that's a requested
Well,
work session item
For a
that we
work session
can
item?
bring, talk with
Okay.
our attorneys and,
Okay.
and bring back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's good.
Okay.
Good work session.
Okay.
Topic.
Okay, anything else? Agenda items? City managers report.
I'm going to turn it over to Eric Underwood. He wanted to provide an update about the storefront grants.
Okay.
So I just wanted to announce, we sent out a press release last week opening up the window to accept new applications for storefront grant and adaptive reuse. So we have some funds available left in this year for storefront grant at almost 15,000, and then we have the entire 150,000 available for the adaptive reuse, and we're accepting those applications until January 10th.
Do you have any applications at this point?
Not at this point, no application.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to make a request for maybe even the next meeting. I think it would be a very good, because I think some things have been said that some groups were getting all the money and so forth. I think it would be a good review to talk about the adaptive reuse grants that we have allocated and what they've done. I don't think any of them went to the same person, actually, or entity. And what they've done, I think it's rather impressive, and I think we need our memory jogged on that.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. I'd like to hear that.
Did you
That's
have
all
any-
that I have for
That's all you
tonight.
have? Okay. So I guess we can adjourn. Thank you all.